Hello Ross Valley community, this is Tyler Graff, your superintendent. I'm here to give you a quick update on the partial tax proposal that we'll be bringing to the May special election. Some of this may be a bit of a review if you've watched our earlier video from the fall on the budget. If not, I encourage you to go watch that. It gives lots of details about how districts are funded across the state and how we compare to those districts. For now, we'll give you a bit of a context on the budget and then go straight into the partial tax. So one of the things that has become very clear to me in the first 6 months working here in the district is the quality of our teachers and staff is absolutely second to none. It's the people that drive our schools that make them the amazing places they are and that attract families from around the Bay Area to come live in Fairfax and San Anselmo. So that is a fact. We have fantastic teachers. The challenge here is that we have the lowest per pupil revenue in Marin County, which makes it very difficult for us to compete with surrounding school districts. And ultimately, we want to attract more high quality talent, more diverse talent into our schools, and retain the great talent that we already have. So in order to be competitive with salaries, we've got two options. First, we can implement budget cuts, and ultimately what that would look like is budget cuts to some of our popular programs, counseling programs, electives, music, other things like that, or we can try to increase revenues through parcel tax revision. So through many conversations we've kind of looked at both of those scenarios, and I'll talk a little bit more about those as we move forward. So many of you have seen this slide before, and this is kind of a brief overview of how districts are funded in Marin County. On the left side of the slide, you'll see there's state-funded districts like Santa Fe and Novato. They get money at the state rate, and they get additional funds for what are called unduplicated students. Those are foster youth, homeless students, English language learners, and our low-income families. So the more of those students you have in your district, the more funding you get above and beyond the state minimum. And then on the right side of the slide, you see folks that are community funded, that are paid for by the property taxes within the school district. Districts like Ross, Mill Valley, and Reed obviously have high property values, and that increases the revenues for the district, which makes it easier for them to offer fantastic programs for their students and salaries for their teachers. You'll see we're right down at the bottom. We kind of flip-flop between state-funded and community-funded. Miller Creek does something similar. Kentfield and Larkspur are kind of in the same ballpark we are. So those are kind of our four comparable districts. Those are the districts we want to be competitive with salaries because those are the folks that are kind of funded in a similar fashion. I'd love to be competitive with Reed and Ross and Mill Valley and Tam, but it's hard to do that when our funding structure is just completely different. And what this slide shows is the per pupil funding per district across the county of Marin. And you can see Ross Valley School District right there at the top with the lowest per pupil revenue in the county at $10,985. Even those comparable districts of Miller Creek, Larkspur, Corte Madera, and Kentfield, they're still generating $1,000 per pupil more than we are. And you can see, Santa Fe and Novato with a higher unduplicated rate can generate more money per student, and then those with higher property taxes like Tam and Ross and Reed can generate quite a bit more money. And what this really means is that when you can generate more money per student, you can offer different salaries to your teachers and really have a competitive wage, and you can offer diversity of programs and supports for students at your school. So Ross Valley really is a lean, mean machine. We do more with less, and we're really proud of that. We have reduced the number of administrators we've had over the last 4 years, and increased our teaching staff to offer more supports for students. So we're really trying to be efficient with the money that we do have. Now, above and beyond the state revenue that we generate in the slide that I just showed, districts across the county ask their local citizens to vote on a parcel tax. Right now we have a parcel tax and it's at $699 per year. Next year with the 3% inflation rate, it'll be about $720. And you can see that that's actually lower than Kentfield and Larkspur-Corte-Madera by quite a significant amount. We're not trying to be at the top of this list, but we do want to be competitive. So that's part of what this revision is with the taxpayers. And you can see our inflation rate is on the lower end and our term is on the lower end as well. So really trying to offer a reasonable tax to our taxpayers here. Okay, for those of you who listened to the budget presentation earlier in the fall, this may be a familiar slide to you. There's really two things I'm trying to articulate. First, under the yellow line is the LCFF revenues. And you can see between 2022-23 school year and the 25-26 school year, revenues are essentially flat. They went from 18.9 million to 18.8 million. So they've gone up a little bit and down a little bit, but essentially flat over the last 4 years. As we all know, inflation has been moving a little bit more aggressively than many of us would like, and the school district is impacted just the same. So with flat revenues and increasing costs, we're really trying to be judicious with the funds that we have and smart with how we spend those funds. So things do look a little bit better in the 26-27 school year. We'll have a little bit more breathing room then, but over the last 4 years, it's been pretty flat. Then down there at the bottom, you'll see under the red line, this is showing whether we were running a surplus or a deficit. Those first 2 years, you see we have about a $2 million surplus that actually went into our reserves. And then you see the projected 4 years, we have pretty significant structural deficit that we need to address. Last year, deficit spent by just over $500,000. Our projections for the next 2 years are $2.6 and $3 million. Pretty significant numbers there, and then comes down to $1.2 million. Those numbers are probably going to be a little bit lower once the budget shakes out, but they're still going to be significant. My best guess is that we'll probably be closer to $1.8 million deficit this year once we close the books in October, and then we'll probably be in the 25-26 school year closer to $2.2 million. So really this shows that our revenues are relatively flat and that we're running a structural deficit that we need to address. And in this slide you can see where our budget reserves are. So in the 21-22 school year, we're at 26.6%, then down to 25.7%, and you can see all the way down to 26-27, where we're down to 5.7%. Now, the board asks us for 10%, and the state has a requirement of 3%. So we're below the board ask, and we're getting close to that state minimum. One thing to note here also is that the average elementary district across the state of California has a reserve right around 25%. And obviously with a smaller district like ours, 25% of a smaller budget is actually a smaller amount of reserve. So on these smaller school districts like Ross Valley School District, it's smart to have a little bit larger buffer than the state requires. In this slide, you'll see a comparison of the salary schedules between Kentfield, Larkspur, Corte-Madera, and Millard Creek. And at the beginning of this school year, this was accurate information, and you can see the cells that are highlighted in green, Ross Valley School District pays better than those other school districts, and in the cells that are red, the other district pays better than us. So you can see kind of we're in the mix here. 6 cells are green, 6 cells are red, so we're right about in the middle of the hunt there. And there have been some changes over the year where districts have settled with their union partners, and this next slide highlights some of that. So you'll see here that there's more red cells than would like here. Kentfield settled for 5% this year. Larkspur Corte-Madera settled for 3%, and we were only able to settle for 1.35%. So more red, showing that we're falling a little bit behind the other districts. And you can see the percentages in there, most of them in the 1 to 3%, so pretty close, but there are a few cells that were falling 6, 8, 9% behind. So Just kind of a warning that we're getting close to not being competitive with those comparable districts. Now, next year, we have not settled with our union partners. However, Kentfield and Larkspur Corte Madera have, and it shows that it's going to turn this even more red. So there's some urgency for us to give some compensation increases to our teachers and staff to make sure we're keeping pace with these districts that are funded in a similar way than we are. Here's what we've done over the past 4 years for raises, and you can see we're kind of, towards the top end, but Miller Creek has not settled. We'll probably fall down a slot here once Miller Creek settles, if they settle for anything more than 0.3%, which they likely will. Now, so a big question is, what is the parcel tax going to be used for? The parcel tax, if approved, will go to pay solely for teacher salaries. All that money will go towards our teachers. There are some secondary benefits because the money will go to pay for teachers. We'll actually have some pressure come off of our general fund as well, which will allow us to pay, our classified staff, do some program improvements for our students, and make sure our facilities are continuing to be taken care of. The parcel tax won't be used for administrative salaries specifically, facilities improvements, or any pension obligations. This is a really important point for us all to know. Now, if the ballot measure doesn't pass, we have that big structural deficit I talked about in earlier slides, and we're going to have to start implementing budget cuts. Our first step would be to start implementing budget cuts of about $500,000 that our Budget Advisory Committee took a look at earlier this fall. And that means reducing class sections and increasing class sizes at Whitehill, getting rid of our guest support teachers, which is a roving substitute that helps with a number of different things on campus, getting rid of a few tech platforms, and the teacher leadership positions at Whitehill. However, with a budget deficit in that $1.5 to $3 million range, $500,000 is not going to cut it. We'll probably have to stagnate raises for our teachers and staff over the next few years, and we'll have to potentially consider deeper cuts, which would include counseling services, certificated PE teachers at the elementary level, elective programs. At least right now our middle school kids get 2 electives, would have to go down to 1 elective, and potentially 5th grade instrumental music would need to be cut in the 26-27 school year. So kind of a 2-year cut there if we were unable to pass the parcel tax. Now, if the parcel tax does pass, we'll be able to negotiate some meaningful salary increases with our teachers and potentially do a 2-year deal where we're settling salary agreements for the 25-26 school year and the 26-27 school year. This will give us an opportunity to retain the great teachers that we have and attract in diverse teachers that mirror our student population. This will make us more competitive with those comparison districts we've been talking about. It'll also help us maintain the excellent student programs that bring families in from across the Bay Area. We'll be able to examine our systems of student support, making sure struggling students get the support that they need, and our special education program continues to make improvements, and will help to minimize or potentially eliminate our structural deficit. Here's some of the details of the parcel tax proposal that our board will be voting on January 29th. We currently have a per parcel tax. Right now it's at $699, which you saw in earlier slides. Next year it's projected to be $720 with that 3% inflation rate. Now the board is considering changing to a per square foot parcel tax, which is a more progressive tax that's more equitable for our homeowners in Fairfax and San Anselmo. The rate would be 52 cents per square foot, and you can see some of the example rates there. A couple that I'll note is that if you have a smaller home, 1,100 square feet, you'll see a effective tax reduction. If your house is the average house in San Anselmo and Fairfax at 1,901 square feet, your rate will be about $988, essentially a $260 increase in your tax that will go to generate $3 million of revenue to help pay our teachers. We're going to continue the 3% inflation rate. The board is not interested in increasing that. They think that that is a reasonable inflation rate, and it is similar to, or is the exact same as the one that we currently have. We're thinking about a 9-year term that would end in 2034. We want to continue the senior exemption. We feel like that's an important part of a reasonable tax. There won't be a cap on the per parcel amount, and unimproved parcels will actually have a reduced rate. Right now they pay the same as any other parcel. If it's an unimproved parcel, it's likely that they'll pay closer to $100. And finally, you can see some of the next steps that we're taking. We've developed a communication plan. I'm currently meeting with interested groups like PTAs and homeowners associations. I stopped by the Fairfax Town Council to give a brief update last week as well. On January 29th, our board will be voting on a resolution to have this measure added to the May's special election. And if they vote yes, on February 6th, we'll file with the county. From there, as a district employee, I'll be giving as much information about the parcel tax as I can. Please reach out to me at tgraph@rossvalleyschools.org. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about this tax. And there'll likely be a parent group and group of community volunteers that are working on the next steps. So if you have anything that piqued your interest or a question that you have, please reach out directly to us. We're here to help make sure this is a transparent, open process so everybody has the information they need to make the accurate vote. Again, thank you for supporting our schools and have a great day.